He took her life in front of the whole class because she rejected him. Camila Pacazzi Zanga was born in 2001 in Bolivia. She had dreams of becoming a teacher, and in order to achieve those dreams, she went to a school that was hours away. She was a single mother to her 5-year-old son, and unfortunately she had to leave him behind when she would go to school, but luckily her family would take care of him. Although it was very hard for her to leave her son behind, she knew that her sacrifices would later pay off in life. While in school, Camila came across this guy named Edwin Marcos Calle Huanca. He was obsessed with her and would act very aggressive towards her. It got so bad that even at one point Camila thought about dropping out, but she continued to stay. Camila's peers even noticed how obsessed Edwin was with her and how badly he wanted her to be his girlfriend. It even came out that Edwin was so aggressive that one time a teacher told him to take out his headphones and he punched that teacher in the face. On October 15th of 2024, as class was starting, Edwin rushed towards Camila and stabbed her multiple times. Their peers were in pure shock of what was happening right in front of their eyes. Some ran away, some tried to grab objects and throw it at him thinking that it would make him stop, and some decided to pick up their phones and record everything. While Edwin was doing this horrific thing to Camila, he kept telling her how much he loved her, and he didn't stop until she was gone. While Edwin was being detained, Camila was rushed to a local hospital, but she was pronounced dead. When Edwin was being questioned by police on why he did this, he stated that she ruined his life and he wanted revenge. Ultimately, Edwin was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison.
I can't imagine being in a situation where your best option is to eat another human being. It was May 1933 and Joseph Stalin had power over the Soviet Union. And he wanted to create this crazy social experiment. He basically decided to take people that he classed as undesirable, some of them criminals, but a lot of them just did nothing wrong. They just happened to be really, really poor. He put them in these so-called labor camps. Now, his two main goals were firstly to just get rid of these people. Basically, they didn't fit with his idea of the perfect Soviet Union. And secondly, he kind of just wanted to see what happened. He was like, will they create their own self-sustaining communities? He was like, I want to see if they can manage to survive and build something out of nothing. It was about to become one of the darkest chapters of Soviet history. So he banished these people to a remote island in the Siberian River called Nazino Island. The island was absolutely tiny, and you can imagine how rammed it was when they suddenly dumped 6,000 people there. It was shoulder to shoulder, and what made it so much worse was the fact that they had no shelter and no food. There was actually really no way for these people to survive, and things very quickly escalated into horror. After the first night, nearly 300 people were dead. There was nowhere to sleep and take shelter, like I said, so nowhere to shelter from the harsh conditions. These people just perished. And of course, there was no medical care. I mean, there was not even any food, so these people very quickly got very ill. And they're hungry, they're unwell, they got very desperate. So authorities went over there. I mean, they definitely could have just rescued people and stopped this whole thing. But actually what they did made this whole thing a lot worse. They gave out rations, but this was even more cruel because this wasn't actually something that they could eat. This was flour. Bear in mind, these people have no cooking utensils, no ingredients, just raw flour. What the hell are they supposed to do with that? Some people tried mixing the flour with river water and got very sick from that, and some died. And some just tried eating it dry and it made them choke. And people were still desperate for just anything that they could get their hands on. So when they were going to give out these rations at the distribution stations, people were charging them. People were desperate to get their hands on them. These desperate, hungry people would charge the stations, and the guards would just shoot at them. Everybody was starving to death, and the survivors were left with basically no choice but to eat the people that were dying around them. They would find corpses on the floor and have to feast off them. One survivor recalled how he had to eat other humans' livers and hearts. Now, it was actually pure evil because these guards were just watching all of this unfold. They definitely could have stopped it, but they decided not to. In fact, when they would see people trying to flee the island on rafts, they would shoot them dead. Within weeks, the situation got so bad, and these guards were kind of fearing the retribution, that they just had to step in. By the time this sick experiment was over, just 2,000 people remained, riddled with diseases and traumatized, but they were alive. And this cannibal island horror actually was totally hidden from the public. Nobody found out until about the 1980s/90s. The entire event was classed as a state secret, and survivors were obviously too scared to speak out about what they saw. Local people now do visit the island to lay flowers and pay tribute to the victims who lost their lives there.
Her neighbor ended her life over her son's iPad. 35-year-old Ajika Owens went by the name AJ and was from Ocala, Florida. She was a mother of 4 and absolutely loved her children and would do anything for them. On June 2nd of 2023, AJ's children were playing in this grassy area that was pretty close to their neighbor, 58-year-old Susan Lawrence. Susan would always complain that these children were too close to her home, so she would record them, call 911 on them, and use racial slurs towards them. On that certain day, Susan called them derogatory names, referred to them as slaves, and told them that they were trespassing. One of AJ's sons had left behind his iPad in that grassy area where they were playing, and Susan noticed and picked it up. Susan then threw a pair of roller skates, and one of those skates ended up hitting AJ's son in the foot. AJ's children went to go tell their mom what had happened with Susan, so she decided she was going to confront her and get the iPad as well. Around 9 p.m., AJ knocked on Susan's front door accompanied by her 9-year-old son. But instead of Susan opening the door and speaking with AJ, she fires one shot through the locked door and hits AJ in the upper chest. AJ collapses on the porch and her child is there to witness it all. Authorities were already en route because Susan had called 911 behind her closed door, stating that she was fearful for her life and truly felt like AJ was going to tear down her door. Mind you, AJ had no intention of that and wasn't even armed. Susan was taken in for questioning, but she wasn't arrested right away. Even though there were plenty of witnesses, the sheriff stated that investigators needed to rule out Florida's stand your ground law first. This delay sparked protests and national outrage, and people were demanding justice for Ajika Owens. 4 days later, Susan was finally arrested and she was charged with manslaughter, assault, and culpable negligence. In August of 2024, she was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Ajika Owens' story is featured in the Netflix documentary The Perfect Neighbor, and it dives deep into the case, the racial tension, and the flaws in stand your ground laws.
This teenager turned up at her own murder trial 5 years after everyone thought she was dead. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of Natasha Ryan. In 1998, a young Natasha was going through a very tough time. Her parents had recently divorced and she had to watch her father move out of their family home in Queensland, Australia, and he actually moved to the other side of Queensland where he remarried and started a whole other family. Natasha had some difficulties in school, she kept on getting told off, and all round she was described as a troubled child, allegedly abusing drugs and got into self-harming. On the 31st of August 1998, 14-year-old Natasha would be dropped off at her high school in Rockhampton by her mother Jenny, who had no idea that that would be the final time that she would see her daughter in about 5 years. When Natasha didn't immediately return home after school, there were no alarm bells ringing, and even when her disappearance was reported to the police, again there was no sense of alarm or sense of worry. This was because Natasha had a history of running away. In fact, only the month before this, she had run away and she was gone for a week. She wouldn't be found until she attended a music festival with her boyfriend, Scott Black, who was a man in his 20s working as a milkman. Again, Scott Black is in his 20s and Natasha is 14 years old. After her disappearance in that August, as the days and the weeks turned into months, Natasha's friends, family, the police and the public all really started to worry the worst. They feared that Natasha had been a victim of an active serial killer. Leonard Fraser was described as a sexual predator of the worst kind. In 1997, he spent some time in prison after he R-worded a terminally ill cancer patient who opened up their home to him. And after he was released from prison for this offence, his crimes only escalated. Leonard would go on to murder between 4 and 7 young women and girls. When he was caught, he confessed to the police that he had murdered 5 people, and one of these people included Natasha Ryan. After Leonard's confession, the devastated family of Natasha held a memorial service for her on her 17th birthday. In April 2003, Leonard Fraser was on trial for the murder of Natasha Ryan. On the 12th day of the trial, prosecutors shocked the court when they revealed that Leonard Fraser couldn't have murdered Natasha Ryan. That was because Natasha was alive and well, and they knew where she was. Queensland police had received an anonymous tip from someone stating that Natasha was living with her boyfriend Scott Black in North Rockhampton. Police would go on to force entry into his home, where they would discover 18-year-old Natasha hidden away in a cupboard. Her skin was lily white and she was pasty, having not been outside in about 5 years. Throughout the time that Natasha was living and hiding with Scott, she very sparsely left the house. Throughout that around about 5-year period, she only recalled leaving the house around 6 times, and it was always at night. Within that time period, the couple had also moved houses several times, and the house where she was discovered in North Rockhampton was only around a mile or so away from her grieving family. After the discovery of Natasha, she had to go in court to testify that Leonard Fraser didn't kill her because she was there and she was alive. Following Natasha's discovery, Scott would spend around about a year in prison for perjury, as he lied to the police, telling them that he didn't know where Natasha was. Natasha was forced to pay a pretty hefty fine for creating false police investigations. After his release from prison, Natasha and Ryan would go on to get married. They would go on to have some children and had a seemingly happy life together. Natasha would become a qualified nurse, and she was described as a good friend and a loving wife. However, sadly, in June of last year, a 40-year-old Natasha would be discovered dead on a golf course. Police would describe her death as non-suspicious.
Imagine coming home one night to find severed human body parts on your bathroom floor. It was summer 1995 in Birmingham, Alabama. Justin Barnett was your typical 23-year-old guy. He enjoyed chilling with friends, going out, watching sports. He was a really nice guy by the sounds of things. He had a very normal life. That was until he vanished. Now, he'd been living with his girlfriend at the time, a woman called Sheila Horton, and Sheila was actually aware that Justin was selling things, if you get what I mean, in his spare time to make a little bit of extra money. She was like, I don't really approve of this side hustle, but I don't actually have any authority. So the night in question, Justin and Sheila and some friends went on a night out, and this was supposed to be just a very normal night out like they usually went on, but they had no idea it would end in tragedy. Now, the exact events of the night are debated, but what we do know is that Justin stayed out later than everybody else did, and he kept hold of Sheila's car. He was like, you guys go home, I'm just going to hang out for a little bit longer and then I'll come home. So everybody made their way home except for Justin. He was like, I'll be back soon, don't worry. But he wasn't back soon. In fact, he wasn't back at all. His girlfriend didn't actually know, but he had stopped at an STRIP club. So his friends and Sheila were all like, where the hell is he? Why isn't he answering our calls? You know, maybe he just got a little bit too drunk. We'll go to sleep and we'll see where he is in the morning. And he still wasn't back in the morning. They were like, okay, this is kind of worrying now. They were frantically looking everywhere that they could think that he potentially could have gone. And when they had no luck, they had to report him missing to police. I always say this, I just can't imagine that moment where like you realize it's gone too far now. This is serious. And the authorities had no luck locating him either. It wasn't until days later, with still no sign of him, that a worrying discovery was made. Randomly in Lakeview, with no sign of any other humans, was Sheila's car. This was very weird because remember, Justin had been in that car that night, and also because police had already checked that Lakeview area and the car wasn't there originally. So was Justin alive, and had he dropped the car off there, or had something more sinister happened here? Nobody got any answers for 2 decades. I mean, 2 days would be long enough, but 2 decades? Can you imagine trying to live your life with no answers, not even being able to properly grieve? Because if you grieve, then the hope's gone. It was January 2015 when a man with a guilty conscience showed up at a police station. He was like, my name is Jonathan Abney, and when Justin Barnett disappeared, I was just 18. He was like, I've got some things I need to tell you. I need to get this off my chest. He was like, I was living with my older sister, Trisha, and her boyfriend, Jeff Martin, at the time. He said, I came home to this terrifying scene. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. All over the bathroom floor were severed body parts. Now, obviously, he was totally traumatized by the whole thing. He couldn't believe what had happened. In fact, his sister, Trisha, had just literally said to him, like, could you give me and my boyfriend some privacy for this evening? Do you mind going out and just coming back later? And he really didn't want to be there, sort of on their romantic evening in together, so he was like, no problem. But it turned out Trisha had her eyes on Justin, and not in a romantic sense. She knew that he had not only a bunch of substances on him, but a lot of money. She worked as a dancer at that STRIP club that he had gone to that night. So her and her boyfriend Jeff planned to rob him, but this robbery went totally wrong. They ended up stabbing him to death and having to dispose of his body. Now, when poor Jonathan arrived back at home, he saw all of this chaos going on in the bathroom, and he just got swept up in the panic of it all and agreed to help dispose of the body parts. Now, sadly, when this all did come to light, the investigators tried to go to the area where he said that the remains were buried, and they found absolutely nothing. So I guess technically Justin is still missing, but the death and destruction wasn't over yet. With Jonathan confessing to the police, suddenly this was all over the news again, and people were about to be arrested. They immediately headed over and arrested Trisha. But when Jeff, the accomplice, got wind of this, he ended his life. Trisha ended up confessing to the killing, but conveniently placed a lot of blame on Jeff, who was now dead. He wasn't alive anymore to tell his side of the story, so I guess it's whether you believe Trisha or whether maybe she was actually the mastermind. She was given life in prison without parole, and Jonathan was actually given immunity for coming and confessing and obviously cooperating with the officers.
This nurse is currently sat on death row. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Talal Abdul Mahdi. Nemisha Pryor was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to start her new venture. In 2008, she qualified as a nurse. This came after her local church in Kerala, India, funded her getting her diploma in nursing. Nemisha couldn't practice in India, however, because when she left school, she didn't complete her exams. However, she would be offered a job inside of a state hospital in Yemen, and she jumped at the opportunity for this. Nemisha was young, smart, and so excited to start this new venture, excited to start working so that she could help provide for her struggling family. She would move to Yemen in 2008, briefly returned back to India to marry her husband Tommy as part of an arranged marriage, and together the couple moved back to Yemen in 2011. By the end of 2012, they would have their daughter. Life in Yemen wasn't easy though. The couple began to financially struggle. Tensions were high in the country, and after the breakout of the civil war, Tommy and their daughter moved back to India, leaving Nemisha behind. She wanted to stay in Yemen where she was still able to work and provide for her family. She would end up leaving her job at the state hospital in Sana'a because the pay wasn't very good, and always having high aspirations for herself, she decided that she wanted to open up her own clinic. Nemisha and Tommy borrowed money off of anyone who was willing to lend it to them to fund opening their own clinic. There was only one problem, however. Because Nemisha was an Indian national, she wasn't a Yemeni citizen. She wasn't allowed to open up her own clinic without having a Yemeni citizen as a partner in the clinic. This is when she became introduced to Talal Abdul Mahdi. He was a Yemeni man who would eventually go on to partner with Nemisha to open the clinic. Soon after the clinic opened and Nemisha and Tommy invested every single penny that they had into the clinic, Talal began to change. He became very controlling, manipulative and abusive towards Nemisha. He would forge a marriage certificate between the two, and he even photoshopped his own face onto Nemisha and Tommy's wedding pictures. He would, quote, physically torture Nemisha, alongside mentally and financially abusing her. Every single penny that they made from the clinic he would keep, and he didn't give her anything. He threatened her with a gun, and when he started to get an inkling that Nemisha was going to leave the country, he took her passport and hid it from her, trapping her in Yemen. With no way of getting home and no money to survive on, Talal had successfully managed to get Nemisha completely dependent on him. Nemisha had attempted to go to the police reporting to them what Talal was doing to her, but instead of the police going and speaking to him or punishing him, instead they arrested Nemisha for almost a week. In 2017, Nemesia came up with a plan on how she was going to get away from Talal. Using things that were likely taken from the clinic, Nemesia would inject Talal with a sedative with the intent of knocking him out for a couple of hours so that she could search for her passport and then flee the country. However, she would inject him with a lethal amount of this sedative, which ended up killing him. Panicked, she enlisted the help of another man who either worked with her in the clinic or for her in the clinic, and together the two dismembered Talal's body. His remains would be stuffed into a suitcase, which was then placed into a water tank inside of Nemesia's home. A month later, while investigating Talal's disappearance, Yemen police would find the remains of Talal Abdul Mahdi. Nemesia would be quickly arrested at the Saudi Arabia border while trying to flee Yemen. She would be charged with premeditated murder, and in 2020 she was found guilty and handed the death penalty. The 16th of July 2025, very recently, was Nemesia's scheduled execution date. However, that was postponed last minute after some intervention by the Indian government, who have been doing everything that they can to try and save Nemesia. They're currently in the process of trying to pull together blood money that they can offer Talal's family in exchange for them allowing Nemesia to be pardoned, freed, and returned back to India.
Two girls, they go hiking, they vanish without a trace, and when their remains are finally found, their bones are bleached, like somebody scrubbed them clean. Oh, and their camera full of disturbing nighttime photos that make zero sense. I'm warning you right now, this one's dark, but stay with me. The girls were Lisanne Froon and Chris Kremers, both in their early 20s, best friends from the Netherlands. In 2014, they head to Phuket, Panama. They were there just to practice their Spanish, volunteer, just have this new life experience together. That morning, April 1st, they decided to go on a quick hike just a few hours up Pianista Trail. And it's known to be a little tricky if you go deep into the jungle, but the part they were at was safe, well-traveled, and tourist-friendly. They were supposed to meet up with their host family the next morning to start their volunteer work, but they never showed up. The host family reports them missing immediately. Search teams are out within 24 hours, helicopters, dogs, local guides who know that trail better than anyone, and for weeks, nothing. Then over a month later, a local woman finds a backpack sitting near the river, just sitting there, not torn, not water damaged, clean, intact, in the middle of this rainy season. Inside was both of their phones, passports, $88 in cash, sunglasses, and a fully functional digital camera. But this is where things start getting seriously creepy. Their phone records showed 77 desperate calls to 911 and 112, the emergency numbers for Panama and the Netherlands. The first call made just hours after they began hiking, but none of the calls ever connected, no service. And then it gets weirder. There are multiple failed PIN attempts on Chris's phone, which either means that Lisanne was trying to unlock it after Chris couldn't, or someone else was. But why couldn't Chris unlock her own phone, and why was someone else even needing to try? And then there's the camera. Oh my god, the camera. Earlier in the day, the photos are what you would expect. Happy, smiling, summit selfies. But about a week later, suddenly there is a batch of over 90 photos, all snapped at night, flash after flash, into total darkness. Some shots look like they're near a ravine or a riverbed. One shows plastic bags and candy wrappers arranged on a rock. Another is a mirror and what looks like a backpack strap positioned on a stone, almost like some kind of signal. But the one that actually makes my skin crawl is a photo showing the back of Chris Krenner's head caught in the flash, and she looks injured. Oh, and one photo number 509, was deleted from the camera's memory card, almost as if that photo showed something or someone they were not supposed to capture. And then 2 months later, pieces of their remains start turning up. A pelvis, a foot that is still inside of a boot, and 33 scattered bones. But here's the part that made my stomach drop. Lisanne's bones still had pieces of skin attached to it, but Chris's bones bleached white. Some officials claim that it was natural sun exposure, but I mean, come on, that sounds sketchy as hell, but hey, what do I know? I'm just a girl. Local authorities called it an accident. They say that the girls probably fell into a river, they drowned, and nature took its course. But please, tell me how that explains the staged-looking backpack, the deleted photos, the nighttime flash pictures, the 77 emergency calls that lasted for days. None of this adds up. So seriously, what do you think happened out there? Because I need to hear your theories on this. Stay safe, watch your surroundings, and I'll see you guys in my next video.
This is a case of a man that was able to manipulate a woman so much that he was able to convince her to let him kill her. This is something out of a nightmare. Today's case that we're discussing is extremely creepy, and we're also going to be discussing some really sensitive topics. So just a warning right now that this is going to get dark. This is also the first case that we're ever going to be discussing out of Ireland. It's really, really well known in Ireland, but really not that well known around the rest of the world. Elaine O'Hara was a very vulnerable woman. Elaine was a victim of relentless bullying throughout her childhood. She suffered from a lot of mental health problems, including severe depression, which she was hospitalized for at a very young age, and she would be in and out of psychiatric institutes all throughout her adulthood. Elaine became extremely close to her doctor that she saw for her mental health, but he suddenly passed away shortly after her mother passed away, leaving her with little to no support system. As an adult, Elaine was very vulnerable. She was very lonely. She had incredibly low self-esteem as well as being severely depressed, and she was desperate for some kind of companionship in her life, which is human nature. In the summer of 2012, Elaine was 36 years old and she attempted to unalive herself. This was not the first time that she attempted this, and for this most recent attempt, she was once again admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Elaine was released from the hospital on August 22nd, 2012, and the exact same day that she was released, she mysteriously disappeared. The evidence pointed towards the fact that Elaine probably unalived herself despite not finding a body, and that's where this case stood for over a year. And then in August of 2013, about a 30-minute drive from where Elaine was last seen, a couple men that were just trying to have a peaceful day fishing at a local reservoir stumbled across a duffel bag. And inside the bag were some clothes, as well as handcuffs, restraints, as well as some other adult items. So this is clearly odd, so they alerted the authorities, and then they did some more searches of the same reservoir where they found some of Elaine's belongings, as well as some more handcuffs, a sharp weapon, as well as a leather mask, and then 2 burner phones. And the conversations that Elaine was having on these phones was very shocking and very disturbing. Before we get into all of that, let's talk about the man that Elaine had been talking to. It was this man right here, this married father of 3, Graham Dwyer. On the outside, Graham was an extremely charismatic, normal guy. I mean, how many times have we heard that before, right? But on the inside, Graham had some incredibly dark fantasies. Actually, just saying dark would be a massive understatement. This was just plain evil. Graham had a fantasy about unaliving a woman with a sharp object while they were doing the deed. So since Graham's wife wasn't really into that kind of thing, he made an account on an alternative dating website. Think 50 Shades of Grey. And it was on this website that Graham first made contact with Elaine back in 2007, so 5 years before she disappeared. They spoke online for a few months before starting an in-person affair in 2008, but by 2009, they weren't seeing each other anymore. They weren't communicating. The affair had run its course until he hit her up out of the blue in 2011. This time, Graham's intentions were a lot more extreme than the last time they saw each other 3 years ago. Graham knew Elaine very well. He knew how vulnerable she was, and he used that to manipulate her. Graham gave Elaine a burner phone, told her to only talk to him through that, and he already put his number in the phone under the contact master. And then he manipulated this very vulnerable woman who was already really depressed into thinking that she should no longer, be here. She should pass away. He would tell her that if she wanted to unalive herself, that she should just let him do it so they could both get something out of it. I would not even be able to share with you the texts that he would send her because they were that disturbing and messed up, but you can easily find them online if you want to. But again, do it at your own risk. He would text her things like, "It's all gonna be worth it when I kill you," smiley face. That's the most PG one that I could tell you. There would be days that Elaine was a willing participant in this role-playing exercise, but there would be other days that Elaine would tell Graham that all she really wanted was a loving relationship, a real boyfriend, and to one day have a family and have children. The month before Elaine disappeared, when she attempted to unalive herself and was admitted into that hospital, she did not tell Graham that she was planning on doing this, and he was mad. And he wasn't mad because his girlfriend, that he's known for 5 years, tried to hurt herself. He was mad that she didn't let him do it for her, And somehow, even though she was in this hospital, she still had that burner phone, and he was like texting her and calling her nonstop while she's in the hospital. Texting her things like, why would you do that? Why didn't you let me do it for you? You need to get out of that hospital right now because you need to be punished. But at this point, Elaine was expressing interest in getting better. She didn't want to pass away anymore. She didn't want to see Graham because she knew what he would do if she did. But Graham convinced Elaine that he was only going to punish her, that he was not going to unalive her. So she left the hospital. She met up with Graham. He lured her into the mountains where he went back on his promise and he took her life. Elaine's partial remains were found around the same time that all those items were found in the reservoir. And investigators had a pretty clear person of interest because it was spelled out for them in black and white. At first, Graham tried to tell them that he did not know who Elaine was, but that's not true, obviously. And they found his male DNA in her bed. And then he was like, yeah, we were having an affair, but I didn't do anything to her. But that's clearly not true either because they have all the messages and they even had videos of him doing things to her. So they know it's not true. And then at one point, I think they even tried to say that, it's consensual. It was all consensual, but none of it worked. Graham was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. He's tried multiple times to appeal this, but as of 2024, he has exhausted all of his legal options, so he will be behind bars for the rest of his life. As of just a few weeks ago, I saw that apparently there's a woman trying to start a relationship with Graham while he's behind bars. If that's you and you're watching this, you're corny and a loser. I don't even care. Women that try to date serial killers and date killers and treat them like they're rock stars are just weird. And that needs to be studied. This is such an unusual case. I don't even think that there's another one like it out there. And I really do think that Graham thought that he was smart enough to get away with it. It's clear that he picked the most vulnerable woman possible that he thought he could manipulate. And my heart truly breaks for Elaine because it's clear that she was suffering with a lot of things and was just desperate for any kind of companionship and any kind of love. And it is true what they say that people accept the love that they think they deserve. I'm no expert on any of this kind of stuff. I never even watched the 50 Shades of Grey movie. I know there's a lot of people that say that he should not be in jail because Elaine consented to the things that happened to her. One, that's not how any of that works. And two, I truly do think that Elaine believed that most of what was going on was just role play. You guys are gonna have to let me know all your opinions in the comments. While you're there, please let me know what case you want me to cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow.
This woman was murdered while on the phone to the police begging for help. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Kiraki Griever. On the 1st of April 2024, 28-year-old Kiraki walked into a police station in North Athens, Greece. Her obsessive, abusive ex-boyfriend, who she had a restraining order against, was spotted hanging around her home, and she was afraid that he was going to hurt her, so she went to the police for help. This wasn't the first time. Kiraki had made several domestic violence reports and complaints against her ex-boyfriend. Kiraki would be in the police station for a total of 8 minutes, and upon her leaving, she noticed that her ex-boyfriend had followed her. Terrified, she called the emergency number for police, explaining that she was scared, and asked the operator if they could arrange a policeman to escort her home. To which the operator replied, quote, "The patrol car is not a taxi." Only moments later, while still on the phone to the operator and in the sight of another officer who was stood on the balcony of the police station, Kiraki's ex-boyfriend would run up behind her, pounce on her, and then savagely stab her to death. Her screams echoing down the phone line and through the streets. The ex-boyfriend, a 39-year-old unnamed man, was promptly arrested and was detained in a mental hospital where he has since tried to take his own life. Kiriaki's father is suing the officers involved. 5 of them have already been let go from their positions.
One of the scariest things that I've ever heard is the voicemail that Henry McCabe left his wife before he mysteriously disappeared. On the evening of September 6, 2015, Henry was partying with some friends at a club called Publitsky's in Minnesota. At this time, Henry's wife and 2 kids were staying with some family in California, so they weren't in town. When they were done partying, for reasons unknown, Henry's friend William dropped him off at a gas station at around 2 a.m. The following events that took place place have never really been explained. At 2:28 a.m., Henry's wife gets a call from Henry, and at first it kind of seems like a pocket dial, but the sounds are literally terrifying. It sounded like he was moaning in pain, almost like growling noises, and you can't really make out what he's saying, although some believe that it sounded like he said he'd been shot. After 2 minutes of these horrifying sounds, a man yells, "Stop it," and then the call disconnects. Only part of the voicemail has ever been released. Here it is. Not long after this call, Henry also called his brother and left him a voicemail too. This time he was crying. Henry disappeared after this, and when he didn't show up for work the next day, he was reported missing to the Mounds View Police Department. At the start of the investigation, police talked with Henry's friend William, who dropped him off at the gas station that night. To their surprise, William had Henry's keys and wallet, and he says this is because he was trying to stop Henry from driving that night. William also tells the police which gas station he dropped Henry off at that night, and authorities immediately began looking for him. But after reviewing surveillance footage, it turns out that William told police the wrong gas station. Thanks to that surveillance footage, they found that William actually dropped Henry off at a Holiday gas station in the complete opposite direction in Fridley. This made more sense considering the area where his phone last pinged and sent that voicemail was in the vicinity of Creekview Park in New Brighton. So they then shifted their search area to this location, but it was like Henry vanished into thin air. There was no activity on his bank accounts, and he wasn't showing up to his job as a Department of Revenue auditor, which he loved. So that, paired with the horrifying voicemail that he left his wife that night, led authorities to believe that he was met with foul play, and even the FBI got involved. But there was literally no evidence of anything happening. There were so many searches for Henry, but every one of them turned up nothing. But then, 2 months later, someone kayaking on Rush Lake in New Brighton spotted something in the water. When police arrived, they discovered Henry's body, and he'd been in the water for quite some time. Despite his voicemail and him saying that he'd been shot, there were absolutely no signs of trauma to his body. The autopsy indicated that Henry possibly died from drowning, but as far as I can find, his manner of death remains undetermined. Some things just don't really add up in this case though, like the location of the club he was at that night, to where his phone last pinged and sent that voicemail, to where he ended up in the water. And the biggest question I have is, how did he get in the water? The gas station that he was dropped off at that night was 6 miles from the lake. Google Maps says that it would have taken him almost 2 hours to walk there, but he sent that voicemail at 2:28 in the morning, just minutes after being dropped off. If he tried to walk and got lost and just fell in the water, how did he get there so fast? And why did William drop him off at a gas station instead of his own house that night? The lake was within minutes of Henry's house, but if you remember, William kept his keys and wallet. So Henry essentially had no way of getting inside of his house, and he didn't have any identification on him if something were to happen. Those who knew Henry say he would never intentionally hurt himself. He was married for 11 years, had a job that he loved, and had 2 beautiful kids. Whatever truly happened to Henry McCabe and caused him to leave that horrifying voicemail that night remains a mystery 9 years later.
Look at what the video posted by Daily Mail. Look at what it says. I'm sorry, human egg farm. I'm literally disgusted, and I have to give a mental health warning because we're gonna hit a lot of sensitive topics. So if you think that listening to this is gonna harm your mental health in any way, please skip this video and I will see you in my next one. Take care of yourselves. I mean it. Like, if you're not taking care of your mental health, I'll block you. I'll do it. In 2023 in Thailand, 3 Thai women came across an advertisement that was for what they considered to be an amazing opportunity. It was an ad for surrogacy work in a different country, the country of Georgia. They were looking for women who would accept an all expenses paid trip to Georgia. Everything was covered, including passport fees and travel costs, with the goal being become a surrogate for families who were struggling to have children of their own. So you would move to Georgia, you wouldn't have to pay for anything, but you would go to a loving family, move in with them, live
live with them in their home throughout your pregnancy. And then you would deliver the baby and you would be paid around close to $20,000 in US dollars, which is a large sum of money. So these women see this ad and they think this is an amazing opportunity. They all were more than willing to go to Georgia to help out a beautiful, loving family in need and to get paid a lot of money in return. It sounded like a win-win. They're intrigued, so they respond to the ad. They kind of raise their hands and say, I want to do this. And shortly after, they're contacted by a man in Thailand who explains a little bit more about what they would be expected to do. And again, reiterates that the only thing that they would have to do would be carry a baby full term. And I'm not saying the only thing they would have to do as if having a baby was an easy thing to do, but you get what I mean. And in return, they would be paid well whilst living in their house with this designated family in Georgia. Great, okay, sounds good, let's do it. The man in Thailand meets them at the airport. He gives them all their flight tickets and off they go. As soon as they land, they are met at the airport by a group of Chinese men. And little alarm bells started ringing because in their heads, they were kind of expecting to meet the designated family that they were going to be working for at the airport. But instead, it was a group of men. So they're starting to feel a little bit uneasy about the situation, but this was new to them. Did they really have any expectations? Not really. They hadn't done this before. They had never been to Georgia before. And this group of men was at the airport waiting for them, expecting them. They then tell them that they would give them a ride. So all three women get in this vehicle with this group of men. And they had no idea that the place that they were getting taken to was straight out of a horror film. When they arrive at their destination, one of the first things that happens almost immediately is that their passports get taken away and their suitcases get taken away, and they're standing there having no idea what they're walking into. One, scared, but also two, confused because all of their belongings just got taken from them, and the building that they're now supposed to walk into looks nothing like a family house, nothing like what they were promised. It has been described as a compound containing 4 houses, and in each house there were a lot of rooms, and in each room there were multiple beds. Inside the first house there were already 60 Thai women being held. The most noticeable thing was that they all appeared to be in poor health, and just by their facial expressions it looked like they were there against their will. When the 3 women arrived, they were all shown to a bed and told that that would be the bed that they would be sleeping in, which was in a room with other beds where other women were sleeping. And then they walked through the houses, and it's been estimated that around 100 Thai women, if not more, were living in these 4 houses. When the group of men left, the 3 women were petrified. I can't even imagine what was going through their head, but their fear and concern only got worse when they started talking to the other women that were in the compound, and they realized that they were being held there against their will in these horrible conditions. Every single one of those women, so 100 if not more, fell into the fake surrogate ad. Every single one of them was from Thailand, and every single one of them ended up in Georgia because they all believed the same lie. Some of them had been there for up to 8 months. I think one of them had been there for almost a year, and they all felt absolutely and completely trapped. But they were not there to be surrogates to loving, happy families. No, of course they weren't. Instead, they were being held and forced to undergo monthly egg retrieval procedures for the group of men to collect their eggs to sell them on the IVF black market. It makes me physically nauseous, like I'm sick, saying that sentence out loud and knowing that it's true. And forcing egg retrieval is not a simple procedure at all. It involves hormonal stimulation that they would literally be strapped down and forced down for, and it's overall an incredibly invasive and traumatizing procedure when it's done the way that it was done to them, and it's one that comes with a lot of health risks. And of course, because what they were doing was extremely wrong and illegal, in the compound there were no safety protocols at all. Zero, none. Putting every single woman in there at high risk for complications. On top of that, they were only given rice and eggs to eat. That was it. That was their diet. And they only were really given enough to barely survive. And they were locked inside of these houses all day, every day, with none of their belongings, no passports, packed full in rooms, living in horrific conditions. And they were constantly told that if they tried to escape, their fingers would be cut off, or worse. And if they wanted to be allowed to leave, they would have to pay the men. Oh my God, I hate them. They would have to give them a lot of money, or they would have to give them enough eggs that would equal to the amount of money. Immediately, those 3 women, along with the other 100 plus women, felt so stuck and so trapped. Now we need to talk about Na. And Na is not her real name, but that is what she's being identified as. Somehow, some way, after Na had been in there for months, she managed to get in contact with her family back in Thailand, and her family managed to get money together, enough money so that Na could pay off her debt to these men so that she would be let go. Na's family paid the money and the men let Na go back to Thailand with her family. Thankfully, she was able to return safely and she was reunited with her family. And even though she was threatened a lot by the disgusting, filthy men before she left, the three women begged Na to seek help. They asked her to please get help when she got back to Thailand because they did not want to be in the compound for an indefinite amount of time, and they also knew that they would never be able to pay the money to pay off their debt. The same month that Na landed back in Thailand, she reached out to a women's charity in Thailand and she told them everything. She told them everything from beginning to end about the entire operation, what was going on, and she begged them to help. The charity was mortified and they eventually reached out to the Foreign Affairs Division of the Royal Thai Police, who then reached out to Interpol, which is the International Police Organization, which eventually led to the rescue of the three women. Thankfully, they were luckily able to return back to Thailand safely in January 20th of 2025. This was only because the charity was able to raise enough money to pay the idiot men to let the three women go, and they did. We know this entire story because those three women decided to go public with their story. We know that their identities are being kept private, but we know that it's true and we know that it matters and we know that it's still happening. As of right now, as we sit here and talk to each other, this is still going on. Those 100 plus women are still there being held against their will. There's currently an ongoing investigation, but I'm hoping and praying that a lot of progress is being made. There's not really a lot of information out on this case right now, but I hope that sooner than later we get an update on what's going on, and I hope that a lot is going on behind the scenes. Truly disgusting, and I literally cannot believe that that this is a real story. Anyway, that is all I have for today's video. Thank you guys for spending time with me today. I hope you're having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
One thing that I will never understand is when someone dies from multiple brutal stab wounds in locations that would be impossible to do to yourself, yet police label it a suicide. I'm talking about the death of Hugues de la Plaza, who was found stabbed to death inside of his San Francisco apartment in 2007. I will say though that this case is incredibly mysterious, down to the murder weapon never being found, and the fact that he was found dead inside of his locked apartment with no obvious signs of an intruder. On June 2nd, 2007, 36-year-old Hugues went out for a night of partying with his friends at the Underground SF, which is a nightclub in San Francisco. He was a sound engineer and had just gotten a new job, so he was really excited and wanted to celebrate. That night wasn't unusual. He and his friends had fun, he was laughing, and he was hitting on girls like he normally would. He left the bar around 2 a.m. and started his walk back home. He lived in a triplex on 462 Linden Street, and it was about a 10-minute walk, a walk that he'd done many times before. The security camera at his neighbor's unit captured him arriving home. He went inside, and his neighbor heard his door close. All three of their front doors are in a row, and the units are pretty much stacked on top of each other, so it was easy to hear what the neighbors were doing. Once Hugues was inside, he made himself a snack, which was rice and peas, and he got on his computer to look at dating sites and real estate in Argentina, as he wanted to buy a house there. What happened after this, no one knows for sure, and it's bizarre. At around 3 in the morning, his neighbor, who was half asleep, was woken up by a loud thud coming from Hugues' unit. The neighbor heard his door open and close, and then a few minutes later open and close again. He then heard footsteps running down the front steps out to the street. The neighbor said that he wasn't overly concerned at this point because it didn't necessarily sound like a fight, so he went back to sleep. But at around 8 the next morning, when another neighbor went outside to get the newspaper, they discovered a gruesome scene. Blood covered the front porch, so they called 911, and when police knocked on Hugues' door and got no response, they went around back. Authorities looked through his kitchen window and saw even more blood, so they kicked down his back door, and that's when they found him. Hugues had been stabbed 3 times in the chest, neck, and abdomen, and it was clear that he died from major blood loss. But here's what's odd. Both the front and the back door had been locked and bolted shut from the inside. No windows had been broken or forced open, and there were no signs of an intruder. Also adding to the mystery is the fact that the murder weapon was missing. At first, San Francisco PD thought that it was a steak knife that was found in the kitchen sink that had a small red substance on it, but that red substance was later found to be tomato sauce. Also adding to the mystery is the fact that blood was everywhere in his apartment, right? But only his footprints were found tracked throughout the house. So because of all of this, San Francisco PD started suspecting that Hugues died by suicide. Their theory was that he possibly took drugs at the bar that night, went home, and then killed himself, brutally stabbing himself 3 times at that. And after doing so, they believe that he went to the kitchen sink and then washed the knife clean. Thus why the murder weapon was never found. In their eyes, if he was attacked, he surely would have yelled or called 911 for help. But according to the autopsy, no drugs were in his system the night he died. The only thing the medical examiner found was small traces of the rice and peas in his stomach that he made for dinner that night. Oog also suffered a number of blunt force trauma injuries as well, including some small abrasions on his forehead, lip, and arm. It's possible that these wounds could have been from self-defense. Although the medical examiner at the scene specifically said, quote, "This is a homicide," they couldn't prove if the stab wounds were self-inflicted or if Oog had been stabbed by someone else. And because there was no initial evidence of a struggle, his manner of death was labeled undetermined. Right off the bat, San Francisco PD believed that this was a suicide, so they really mishandled the investigation and kind of pushed that narrative. But Oog's friends and family believe otherwise. His parents lived in France at the time, and once they learned how their son's case was being handled, they hired a private investigator. And the French government actually got involved because of how questionable San Francisco PD's investigation was. So they sent forensic experts to San Francisco to re-examine the evidence, and those investigators concluded that Oog was murdered. They believed that he opened his door that night and was attacked on the front porch, but made it back inside to lock the door. But because of how severe his neck wound was, he would have died within a minute or two, and sadly just died before he could call 911 for help. They also concluded that the angle the knife went into his body, he just couldn't have done it to himself. This would all make sense considering the knife was never found. In 2009, the Los Angeles Police Department reviewed the case, and they believed that he likely died by suicide. But they did point out all of the flaws in the original investigation done by San Francisco PD. They stated that San Francisco PD had poor communication and even lost crucial pieces of evidence. And now it's almost impossible to know what truly happened that night. But another review was done by a medical examiner this time, and just like the French authorities, they concluded that Oog was murdered. Blood splatter was found on the outside wall of the apartment, and it likely came from Oog raising his arm in self-defense as he was being stabbed. This medical examiner believes that he was attacked from the lower landing of the front stairs. But now the question remains, who would do this and why? His friends have a few theories. Oog was reportedly a big flirt and would hook up with a lot of women. So one theory is that a scorned or jealous partner killed him that night. But Oog was also known to occasionally use cocaine. So another theory is that he somehow got involved with the wrong dealer. And according to the medical examiner, with how deadly the stab wounds were, they believe whoever killed him has a criminal history. Adding to this theory, his neighbor did have a security camera that captured Oog returning home that night, but it never showed anyone leaving his house that night either. It was a motion-activated security camera, and it was pretty blurry at that. It wouldn't have taken much to see that camera, and like investigators said, anybody casing the house would know how to stay out of the camera's view. With the overwhelming evidence that we do have, it just doesn't seem like Oog could have or would have done this to himself. But it's now been 17 years, and whoever killed him has never been found. Whatever happened to Oog that summer night remains a mystery.
She's the epitome of, I don't know, it wasn't me. She kept up her lies on the stand for 8 days, was like, oh, my in-laws are dead because of a meal that I fed them. I don't know, must have been someone else. The mushroom murders, I wanted to wait until there was a verdict reached on this case. Now let's talk about it. Erin Patterson was born and raised in Glen Waverley in Australia. She was one of 2 children to her parents, and Erin was described as a happy, normal little girl, although we later find out from Erin herself that for as long as she could remember, she always struggled with self-esteem issues. Erin went to university. She graduated, I think. She also worked as an air traffic controller for some time, but then ended up working for an organization that worked with animals. It was in 2004 when she met Simon Patterson, and he caught her eye immediately. They fell in love, started dating, and 3 years later they got married. After the wedding, both Erin and Simon quit their jobs to go travel the world, which is a bold move. However, they could afford to do this. They could afford it because Erin's grandmother passed away and she left Erin with a lot of money. Years later, her father passed away and then her mother passed away, and they too left Erin and her sister with a pretty big inheritance. So money for Erin wasn't really an issue. She was doing well financially. Erin and Simon go on to have 2 children together, and throughout those years of raising their kids, Erin ends up getting really close to her in-laws, Dawn and Gail. Dawn and Gail were both teachers up until the time, did I just spit? Did you see that? They were both teachers up until the time that they retired, and they've been described as the most sweetest, loving, caring couple. They were the kind of couple that just worked together as a team. They moved through life together and they worked so well together. Erin also met and got really close to Simon's aunt and uncle, Heather and Ian. Heather and Ian, also beautiful people. They've been described to be extremely generous, loving, and helpful in their community. I believe Dawn, Gail, Heather, Ian, and Erin and Simon all went to the same church together. So they were known by everyone and they were liked by everyone. But anyway, Erin ends up getting really close to Simon's parents and his aunt and uncle because that's that's just kind of what you do when you get married. You more than likely eventually meet your significant other's family members, and you more than likely build a relationship with them, and Erin did. However, when it came to her and Simon's marriage, it was kind of rocky. It wasn't uncommon for them to be fighting, for them to break up or separate. They would be on good terms and then bad terms, and then they would go to couples counseling, reconcile, get back together, and it felt very unstable. That was until 2015, when Erin and Simon officially get separated. And as far as their assets, they basically end up splitting everything 50-50, but they remained on good-ish terms. They wanted to be on good terms because they wanted to make the separation as easy as it could be for the kids, so they put effort into acting civil around each other. Erin still obviously loved Simon's parents and his family members. She actually continued hanging out with them and showing up to family events, so nothing really changed in that regard. And she would say all the time how much she loved Dawn, Gail, Heather, and Ian. She would talk about how grateful she was for them and everything that they had done, not only for her but also for their kids, and claimed that she cherished the relationship with them a lot. However, that likely was not the case, because around 2020, Erin ends up joining a lot of true crime Facebook groups, and she becomes online friends with some of the members in said groups. She didn't really have many friends, many people that she hung out with or spoke to, so most of the people that she did have that she would consider a friend came from those online groups. And to her online friends, she would often speak about Simon and about his family members, but she would speak about them in a very disrespectful way that would actually make you think that she hated them all. And this weird fake tension between her and Simon really became a thing in 2022 when Simon filed a tax return and he filed as single. That was the first time that Simon ever filed as single since his marriage with Erin, and Erin was not happy. She did not like that at all. She was livid because now it meant that she would have to file for child support, and she would text her online friends about this, saying things such as, "I'm sick of this. I want nothing to do with them. This family, I swear to God, why isn't she horrified her son is such a deadbeat that I had no choice but to claim?" So she's pissed. And again, as far as her relationship with Simon, there is clearly some known tension in the air. But as far as her relationship with her in-laws, they are still fine, and she's pretending that she loves them still. And then July of 2023 comes around, and Erin goes to church where she sees Simon's uncle Ian, and she goes up to him and says, "Look, I want to host a lunch at my house. I want to have you, Simon, Dawn, Gail, and Heather attend this lunch at my house." And she kind of hints at the fact that she has something important to tell them, and kind of hints at the fact that it's health related. So they pick a date, July 29th of 2023, for all 5 of them to go to Erin's house and have some lunch. But the day before, Simon calls Erin and says, "Look, I'm not coming. There's a weird tension between us. I don't really feel like sitting in on an awkward lunch. I'm just gonna stay home. You have a nice time with my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle." And Erin's response to that is, "Well, screw you," kind of. She says, "This is really disappointing. I really want you to come. I need you to come. I have something very important to tell all of you, and I've spent so much time working and prepping this meal that we're gonna have, and it would really mean a lot to me if you showed up. So, hope to see you tomorrow." Simon reads her response, doesn't reply. The next day comes around, and he also does not show up for lunch. So having this lunch at Erin's house is Erin, Dawn, Gail, Heather, and Ian, and they show up. Gail and Heather offer to help with the meal, to help set the table, and Erin is like, "No, you guys sit down. You guys are my guests. I'll take care of everything." So she serves them lunch. She made individual beef Wellingtons, one for each person, and she serves them all in the same colored plates. So they all have either white or gray plates, but her plate is orange. And then finally, they get around to talking about why they're there for lunch in the first place, and Erin tells them that she has big news. She has been diagnosed with cancer. And Dawn, Gail, Heather, and Ian feel horrible. Of course they do. And they are very, very empathetic, telling her that they will be there for her. They offer their support to take care of the kids or do whatever they could do to help. And they made sure that Erin knew that she could count on them, whatever it was that she needed. Then they all gather their hands together and pray for her. They finish their lunch and the guests leave. By midnight that same day, every single person who attended that lunch, who ate that meal, Dawn, Gail, Heather, and Ian, they all start getting terribly sick. They felt violently ill with symptoms resembling severe poisoning. It was so bad. Every single one of them was trying to sleep but didn't really get much sleep because they couldn't, because of how sick they were. And first thing the next morning, Dawn ends up calling an ambulance to come pick him and Gail up and take them to the hospital. So those are Simon's parents. Upon learning of how sick they were feeling, Simon is thinking, "Oh my God, it must be something," based on the symptoms they were describing, it must be something that they ate. So knowing that his aunt and uncle ate the same meal, Simon calls Heather and Ian to check on them, but they don't answer. So Simon shows up at their house. Heather and Ian are in terrible condition. Heather is lying on the floor with a bucket next to her. Ian looks completely drained, exhausted, and sick. So Simon puts them in his car and drives them to the hospital immediately. And that's when Heather mentions to him that they all had individually eaten beef Wellington. And she mentions to Simon that she remembers thinking that it was interesting that Erin Erin served them all on white or gray plates, but she served herself in an orange plate. And then they all collectively start wondering if Erin is also feeling sick and experiencing the same symptoms because, you know, they all ate the same thing, and she was, or so she said she was. Erin said that she had also started feeling sick and said that she felt really nauseous and had been unable to get up from the toilet because her stomach was so messed up. However, we later find out that that day, the day after that lunch, Erin drives 2 hours to take her son somewhere. And in between that drive, she stops at a gas station. She's seen on CCTV footage entering the gas station and going to the bathroom for 9 seconds, not minutes, seconds. So she's claiming that she feels so sick, so severely ill that she can't stop going to the bathroom because her stomach is just that messed up. Yet for some reason, she's completely fine to make a 2-hour drive, and when she does stop to go to the bathroom, she only goes to the bathroom for 9 seconds, which is weird. She later says that her stomach hurt so bad that while she was on that 2-hour drive, she had to pull... Did I just spit again? What's wrong with me? When she was driving, she had to pull over on the side of the road because she had to go to the bathroom so bad. And she, I guess, relieved herself on the side of the road and used some tissues in a bag to clean up herself. So she says that when she did go to the bathroom, was in there for 9 seconds, all she was doing was throwing away the tissues or the things that she had used to clean herself. Anyway, back to Dawn, Gail, Heather, and Ian. At this point, each couple was at a different hospital, but the test for all 4 of them, tests revealed abnormal amount of toxic mushroom poisoning. Doctors suspect that they had all eaten death cap mushrooms, which is one of the most poisonous mushrooms on earth. Erin actually ends up taking herself to the hospital, and doctors are like, oh my god, please come in, we need to admit you if you ate the same meal as these other 4 people because they are all really sick and you're probably about to get really sick. But Eric says, actually, no thanks, I don't want any testing done, I don't need your help, and she leaves despite medical advice that she had to stay. So a doctor actually calls the police and says, look, I have 4 people that are terribly sick, 5 people had the same meal on Saturday, and we suspect that there were death cap mushrooms in the meal, which are extremely poisonous. We have 4 of the guests in terrible condition in the hospital, and the 5th guest came, but she left. She left the hospital, and we are all really worried about her. So an officer ends up getting dispatched to Erin's home to collect the leftovers from the meal, and that's when it's confirmed that yes, there were death cap mushrooms inside the beef Wellingtons. Despite doctors' best efforts, Dawn, Gail, and Heather are all pronounced deceased in the hospital. Ian luckily survived, but he remained in intensive care while they worked on stabilizing him until he was okay enough to be released. Police launched an investigation into this immediately because there were a lot of things that just were not making sense. The biggest one being that Erin, the one who cooked the meal, seemed to be fine despite 3 out of her 4 guests losing their life due to the meal that she served them, and the 4th guest clinging to life. So let's run through Erin Patterson's lies because there are a lot. First of all, when asked, Erin told investigators that she purchased dried mushrooms at a big grocery store. She then changes her story and says that she actually bought them at an Asian grocery store. So investigators go out and try to find them, but they obviously cannot because she's lying. Erin's story is that she bought the mushrooms dried already, and she said that she herself did not own a dehydrator. But then investigators find evidence that Erin Patterson purchased a dehydrator on April 28th of 2023, a brand new dehydrator, and then they find CCTV footage showing her going to a dump to get rid of the dehydrator on August 2nd, 2023. So just days after, while everyone was in the hospital, she went to a dumpster and tried to get rid of it. And she later tries to cover that up by saying, oh no, I didn't do that because I'm guilty of anything. I just did that because I was so scared that I would get blamed for trying to poison everyone. Erin then says that she had never dehydrated anything, especially mushrooms, because her children did not like mushrooms. But after collecting electronic evidence, her search history showed that she had visited a webpage about death cap mushrooms in May of 2022, so over a year before she purchased them. So she had been looking into this for over a year, which is terrifying. And using cell phone data, they were also able to prove that Erin did purchase the mushrooms herself and that she did dry them out herself using her own dehydrator. She also attempted to factory reset her phone like 3 or 4 times while investigators were inside of her house with her. And during the search warrant, she gave them a phone, but she had 2 phones. So she basically hid the one phone that she was making all those searches on and just gave them the other one, pretending that she had never looked up death cap mushrooms before. We also know that she also tried to claim that she was sick and could not stay away from the bathroom, but CCTV footage was found of her in that 2-hour road trip stopping at a gas station to enter the bathroom for 9 seconds, which obviously didn't help her case. She also claimed that she adored her in-laws, that she loved them and Heather and Ian, but then investigators found all of those messages between her and her online friends of her basically talking trash about them. And to top top it all off, remember, the reason why she gathered them for said lunch to begin with was because she had the news that she had cancer. Well, she didn't. She never had cancer. She was never at risk of having cancer. She just completely made it up. And she said that she made it up because she had self-esteem issues. And she claimed that she wanted to have gastric bypass surgery, and she was embarrassed about it, but she knew that she would need help recovering from her surgery. So she just used cancer as her lie. But it was completely calculated and fabricated and just literally not true at all. Erin Patterson was arrested November 2nd of 2023 and charged with 3 counts of murder and 5 counts of attempted murder for her in-laws, their relatives, and her estranged husband, Simon, although the charge of attempted murder against Simon was later dropped. Her trial began April 29th of 2025, and Erin Patterson spent 8 days on the stand just lying. It felt like literally every single thing that she was saying on there could be proven to be a lie, and quite quickly. The jury deliberated for 6.5 days before finding Erin Patterson guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. She has not been sentenced yet. I believe her sentencing hearing is April 25th or 26th. So we don't know yet what her sentence is going to be, but why what? I don't know, you guys. This case is whack in every single way and so sad. 3 people, almost 4, gone because of this. Because why? I don't get it. Anyway, that is all I have for today's story. A lot of you guys were asking me to cover this case, so I want to hear what your thoughts are on this, especially if you live in Australia. I want to hear about all the buzz and everything that this created, because this was just insane on every level and heartbreaking. Anyway, that is all for me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Also, tomorrow, new podcast episode on the Menendez brothers trial. And I mean, I could talk about that one for 6 hours, so make sure that you tune in on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
This is the story of Marsha Hickman. January 5th, 2010, Forest Park, Georgia. 15-year-old Candace sneaks out the house to meet 2 friends from her school, 17 and 18-year-old Marsha Hickman and Jermaine Robinson. Now, when Candace is approaching this house that Marsha and Jermaine told her to come to, she's noticing that this house is an old classmate's house that has moved away. So the house is abandoned, but she decided to go in anyway. When she walked in, it was completely dark, so she didn't see Jermaine pick up a rake and strike her over the head with it. And as she went to the ground, she could see Marsha standing by the door so she wouldn't escape. But Candace is putting up a fight. They was trying to take her phone, but they couldn't manage to get it. They unzipped her pants, but Candace kept on kicking. She even pleaded to them to let her go, and please, she wouldn't tell anybody, but they wasn't paying her any attention. Then some lights poured into the driveway. When Marsha and Jermaine seen the lights, they let Candace go. And as she's fleeing out the door, they yell at her, "If you tell anybody, we're going to kill you." The lights in the driveway just so happened to be Candace's mother. Now, it's unclear if she contacted her mother before she went in the house, or her mother woke up and seen Candace was not there and went out looking for her. Either way, she was there to save the day. As Candace was running to her car, she told her mother 2 men just tried to rape her, but she would not tell her mother who the men were. Now, even though Candace wouldn't tell her mother who tried to sexually assault her, she did confide in a friend from school named Danny Jackson. Now, she told Danny not to tell anybody, but Danny went straight to Jermaine and said, "You best to stay away from her." Jermaine was terrified that people was going to find out what they did. So he ran straight to Marsha to let him know that, hey, man, Candace is out here telling people. And Marsha simply said, "Don't worry about her." On the morning of April 28th, just 3 months later, Candace's mother wakes up and notices that she's not there. She calls her phone repeatedly up until about midday without getting any answer. That's when she decided to call the police, but of course they wasn't too much of a help. With Candace being 15 years old, they automatically associate that with being a runaway. And that's what they labeled her, a runaway instead of missing. Now, later that day, Candace's mother got a text from Candace's phone saying that she's in Tennessee. But Candace's mother, something's not right about this. She got another text from her daughter's phone the following night saying, "I'm okay." But that was the last message she had ever gotten. It wasn't until several months later, November of 2010, the police get a phone call saying that they found a body under a mattress in a wooded area. It wasn't until the next day where the remains were confirmed to be 15-year-old Candace Parchman. Her body was found in an area called The Cut, where the teenagers would cut through an apartment complex and go to a subdivision. But even though Candace's body was found, it was still no evidence or no leads of who could have done this. Her case went cold for over a year. It wasn't until October of 2011 when her mother was preparing to move out of her home and she stumbled upon Candace's diary. And when she opened it, what she seen broke the case wide open. The entry from January 5th of 2010 titled Marche and Jermaine. She immediately turned the diary over to the police. When the police went to go question Marche, who was already in jail, by the way, for burglary, he said that the sexual assault was all Jermaine's idea and that he just stood there at the door so she wouldn't get out. When questioned about her death, Marche said he did see Candace the night before she disappeared. He was playing basketball in his apartment complex and she was walking through the cut to go home, and a Hispanic man was following her. Now, the police believed this because they had just arrested and convicted a man named Artemio Hernandez for killing a teen close to Candace's age, and she was even found 2 miles from where Candace was found. When the police went to go question Artemio, he was very honest. He said, "Yes, I killed the others, but I did not do this one." He said he'd never seen Candace before. This is when they brought Jermaine in for questioning in hopes that he would snitch on Marche. But the police didn't even have to ask Jermaine any questions because as soon as he sat down, he said, "Man, Marche killed that girl." And the police asked him, how did he know? And he said, because Marche is crazy and that he was even scared of Marche. Jermaine admitted his involvement in the attempted rape of Candace, but he said he did not kill her. He even said that he was willing to testify against Marche. That was the breakthrough the police needed, but they wanted a confession. So they interrogated Marche one last time. They told them that they found his DNA on Candace's body. And that's when Marche broke. He admitted to killing Candace. He said he choked her, but he does not remember stabbing her, that he must have blacked out at that point. He said he seen Candace walking through the cut on her way home, and he attacked her from behind and choked her until her body went limp. And he woke up the next morning with scratches on his arm. And he did confess that Jermaine did not have anything to do with the murder. The autopsy report revealed that Candace was strangled and stabbed multiple times as well. Marche pled guilty and was convicted on malice murder. On April 26, 2013, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. As far as Jermaine Robinson, he pled guilty for his role in the attempted sexual assault against Candace. He was sentenced to 10 years. I don't know if he completed the whole 10 years. I don't see anything about him being locked up today. I really couldn't find a lot on Jermaine, but yellow tape. What y'all think?
From the second he came back home, everything felt wrong, and not to spoil or anything, but it was. So, 1994, San Antonio, Texas. Nicholas Barclay, 13 years old, and he was, as his family would put it, a handful. Fights, petty thefts, he even had a court hearing scheduled the very next day. So when he disappeared after a basketball game one day, everyone kind of assumed that he ran away. Even the cops, they barely blinked, like this boy had a record and they did not bother looking. But then days passed, and then weeks, and Nicholas never came back home, and now at this point, it stopped feeling like a rebellion and more like something way worse. 3 years go by, 3 whole years, and suddenly the Barclays' family, they get a call from overseas in Spain. They say that they found Nicholas, as in across the entire ocean, from Texas all the way to Spain. Make that make sense. And on the phone, Nicholas is saying that he was kidnapped, tortured, forced into a ring, but then he escaped, found somebody to help him, and now he's coming home. His sister flies to Spain. She sees him, hugs him, brings him back home. I mean, it should be a miracle, except it's not. Because I mean this in the nicest way possible. The Nicholas that they brought back home looked nothing like Nicholas. I mean, this boy had brown eyes and Nicholas had blue eyes. He had a French thick accent, but he said that it was from trauma and being overseas for so long. Like, trauma changes your personality, I understand, but not your eyeballs. And I know what you're thinking, like, hello, how could you not realize? But listen, grief can can mess people up. Hope can cloud judgment more than a lie ever could. They wanted to believe that it was him. Some family members were already suspicious about it, but the longer that they stared at this kid, the more obvious it got. This boy is not Nicholas. Eventually, the FBI did step in. They asked for fingerprints, blood samples, the basic stuff, but this boy refused. So the FBI gets a court order, and the results, not even close. This boy was not 13. He was not Nicholas. He was a full grown-ass man, Frederick Burding, a literal serial imposter who made a career out of pretending to be missing children. I'm not even kidding. He convinced an entire family that he was their missing child. Frederick went to prison for it, but Nicholas, the real Nicholas Barclay, he was never found, and he is still missing to this day. This story sounds like a comedy skit, I know, but it's real and it's so sad. I just really hope his family can get real answers one day, but like always, thank you guys so much for being here with me. Watch your people, watch your surroundings, and I will see you guys next time.
This is the story of Demetric Hooper. June 14th, 2012, Mobile, Alabama. 14-year-old Brittany Robinson is excited to spend 2 days with her father, 44-year-old Demetric Hooper. Now, Demetric hasn't always been consistent in Brittany's life due to his drug and mental problems, but she loved her daddy anyway, and she was excited to spend time with him. So her mother arranged for her auntie, who is Demetric's sister, to pick her up around 9 a.m. that morning. Brittany's auntie, whose name is Sierra Hooper, picked up Brittany and then picked up her father, Demetric, and dropped them both off at his apartment. On June 18th, which is a little longer than the 2 days she was supposed to spend at her father's house, but Brittany's mother is like, my baby's having fun with her father. It's okay, but today, the 18th, she needs to be returning home. Brittany's mother is calling Demetric's phone, but she's not getting any answer. She's still not thinking too deep into it until 2 more days pass, and she randomly gets a text message from him saying he's going to drop Brittany off in an hour. Several hours had passed and Brittany still wasn't home, so her mother decided to call his phone again. Now, he did not answer, but he did text right back saying that his phone didn't have any minutes and that they were at a wedding party and he was going to drop Brittany off as soon as it was over. When Brittany still didn't make it home and Demetric cut off all communication, her mother decided to go to his apartment with his landlord. Now, when they got to the apartment, it was no sign that Brittany was ever even there. She then decided to contact Sierra Hooper, who is Demetric's sister and the one who dropped them off at his apartment. And Sierra said a couple days after she dropped them off, Demetric called her and asked her to take him downtown, which she did, and she picked him up from downtown and took him back home. But Brittany was not with him. She thought Brittany had already went back home. Brittany's mother reported her daughter missing that same day. She said she was very concerned because Brittany was severely asthmatic and she didn't have enough medication. Almost a month until Brittany and Demetric's disappearance, on July 9th, an unidentified man identified Demetric on a bus from Mississippi to Tennessee. The unidentified man told the detectives that Demetric used the phone of the person that he was sitting next to. Now, he said that he didn't know where he was headed because when they got off in Tennessee, they went their separate ways. But Demetric did say something about Arkansas. Brittany was not seen on the bus with him. On July 25th, they issued out a warrant for Demetric's arrest, charging him with custodial interference, which is taking the child away from their legal guardian, basically. On August 1st, the police spent the day searching in and around Demetric's apartment for any signs of Brittany, but turned up with nothing. It wasn't until August 13th when police had received information that Demetric had been sighted in Fort Smith, Arkansas. The U.S. Marshals issued a statement to the public asking them to contact the local authorities if they seen him or Brittany. But it wasn't until almost a month later, September 9th, 2012, when they finally arrested Demetric at a mental health facility. They said he had checked himself in to treat his schizophrenia. And when they arrested him, he had Brittany's pink iPad on him, a knife, and some rope. Demetric had resisted arrest to the point where it took 4 officers to restrain him and put him in the back of a squad car. Once he got to jail, he threatened suicide. When asked about the whereabouts of Brittany, he said he had no idea where she was, but he would never hurt her. It had came out that he had been in Arkansas since July, but he had traveled through the southeastern United States after she vanished. He had traveled to these different states by bus, but he used an alias. He was even seen on a couple of surveillance cameras at some establishments, and Brittany was not with him. January 29th, 2013, the police used search dogs to search around Dimitri's home for any signs of Brittany, but turned up with nothing. It wasn't until February 10th of 2014 when Dimitri pled guilty for custodial interference and was sentenced to 10 years. But he only ended up doing 2 years. He was released in 2016 for good behavior. This infuriated Brittany's mother because she still didn't know what happened to her baby. And y'all letting him go? It wasn't until February of 2024, 12 years, Brittany has been missing. They decided to indict Dimitri for her disappearance. They had no body, nor did they have evidence. They were simply going off of the passage of time. When they went to arrest Dimitri, guess where he was at? In jail already, in Oklahoma, for unrelated charges. His trial started in June of 2025. Now, it did come out in trial that in 2004, he was facing a similar case with one of his other children. I don't know if he did abduct them or he was trying to abduct them. It also came out that he has been battling mental health issues for a very long time. He has been in and out of mental hospitals throughout the years. Around the time Brittany disappeared, Dimitri was on a new medication. I don't know if they're trying to say the new medicine made him click or what. But when he got arrested in Arkansas at that mental facility, he was actually getting paid by researchers to try out their new medication. On June 9th, 2025, Dimitri Hooper was found not guilty. There was no physical evidence. They don't have any body. Hell, they don't even know if Brittany is dead or alive. They was not able to present a case that proved his guilt without a reasonable doubt. Dimitri has not said anything outside of he does not know where his daughter is. He has not showed any remorse that his daughter has been missing since 2012. This is an age progression photo. But Brittany is still missing. Brittany is still missing, and they done took this man to trial, and he is found not guilty, which means he can't even be tried no more. In my heart of hearts, I know that man killed her. And the fact that he can't even be tried for it anymore is insane to me. I'm so curious, Yellow Tape, of what y'all got to say about this.